I've talked a lot about my personal favorite games on this channel. These were the forgotten games that may not have reshaped or defined a genre or the gaming landscape at large, but did what they did well, and that I never really hear anybody bring up. This seems to be something of an ongoing trend on this channel. So I've decided let's do at least one more video where we talk about some games that seem to have fell under a lot of people's radar. This time though, I've decided I'm going to switch things up a bit and talk about a handful of games instead of focusing on just one. So let's talk about the unpredictable world of licensed games. Most of them are god-awful quick cash-ins made by seeing D-list developers in hopes of writing off their source material for a quick buck. But every once in a blue, you get a game that had genuine, honest-to-God effort put forth into making something truly special for fans of its original source material. Hell, sometimes you get one good enough to appeal to people who weren't already fans of the license. More on that in just a minute. Sure, there are good licensed games out there, even great ones. I hear people bring up games such as The Simpsons Hit and Run, South Park The Stick of Truth, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, basically every game made by Telltale, not to mention all those games based off of Disney movies released for the Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo. And in this video, I'm going to be talking about none of them! Like I said, I'm focusing on 4 games that I never hear people bring up. As someone who tries to find the good in every game he plays, I'm going to try and explain exactly why I personally like these games. So let's get started. The first game on my list is based off of a license that well, I admit I never followed too closely. Or at all. That game was Buffy the Vampire Slayer for the Xbox, developed by The Collective and released exclusively for the Xbox in 2002. I admit, I think I've seen a cumulative total of 15 minutes out of a whole 7 seasons this show is on. Now you're probably asking, hey Tom, if you never watched Buffy, what the heck are you doing playing the game? No, it's simple really. The screenshots I saw on EGM and the gameplay trailer for it looked interesting, so I went down to Blockbuster Video, yeah, remember that place, and I rented it. That's why this game is on this list. The game is set within the show's 3rd season, according to the wiki article anyway. Basically, Buffy gets a premonition of an old villain returning, and vampires start attacking the town. Pretty basic plot, that's really all I needed to go off of. Gameplay is the standard linear progression. You usually just need to make it to the end of the stage. Sometimes you'll need to find a key or a power switch or something to open the exit. Along the way, you'll run into the trademark enemies of the game, vampires. The combat revolves around you beating them into submission, and then when their health is low enough, you can drive a stake into their hearts to finish them off. And while this mechanic can get a bit repetitive, it does kind of make sense for the source material. Your stakes can break after extended use, but you are allowed to carry a few of them at a time, and many of them are just lying around in easy to spot places, so it never really became an issue for me. Add to that the enemies don't respawn, and it becomes that much easier to handle. But there are plenty of other enemies that you don't have to stake to finish off, so that keeps it from getting too monotonous. Though I never really found staking vampires to be all that intrusive, except when I don't have a stake equipped and I have to stop in my tracks and hit down on the D-pad to pull it back out. Also, if the enemies hit you hard enough, they can fly out of your hands and you'll need to pick them back up. That part's kind of annoying. One really cool thing this game did was they got nearly all the actors from the show to voice their respective characters, with the big glaring omission being Sarah Michelle Gellar. Though her stand-in does the job pretty well, as far as I can tell.
And that tattoo just screams biker slut.
Just be prepared to hear the same one-liners again and again during gameplay.
Nothing like a brisk walk and a spot of demon slaughter to make a girl's night. Nothing like a brisk walk and a spot of demon slaughter to make a girl's night. Nothing like a brisk walk and a spot of demon slaughter to make a girl's night. Nothing like a brisk walk.
I was also surprised to learn they managed to get Allison Hannigan to voice Willow in this game.
Cutting the power, I'm thinking they're smarter than the average bear. Or average vampire bear.
For the most part, the actors do a solid job, but occasionally you do get that awkward delivery.
Maybe you didn't hear me, you skanky blood-sucking hoe. Thinking I'd put me down before the Slayer kicked my ass.
Strangely enough, another positive is this game's music. I don't know if it's music from the show or if it's an original soundtrack for the game, but it's solid, and it fits the atmosphere of the levels perfectly. One of my personal favorite levels in the game is the combined areas of the cemetery and Angel's hideout. You fight some really grotesque-looking zombies, which were always some of my favorite enemies in the game. They're just so freaky-looking, and their death animations are pretty funny. Speaking of fighting, one of the game's main focuses is the fighting. You fight so many different types of enemies, from vampires to zombies to freaky-looking hellhounds. You're going to be fighting a lot, and it'd be a drag if the combat system wasn't satisfying. Fortunately, the combat system is one of the game's biggest strengths, with a few different button combination style fighting techniques you can pull off. You also gain access to what are called Slayer powers. The purple bar represents your Slayer power, which is basically like magic. You'll gain new abilities that are pulled off by specific button presses that unleash deadly techniques on your enemies. Finding crystals scattered in secret places in the levels can increase your overall health and Slayer power when you bring them to Willow in between levels. On the downside, besides the repeating voice lines, there really isn't much of a checkpoint system here. When you die, you have to start the section of the level you were in all over again. If you fought a boss and you die, you have to start that section of the area all over again. The first fight with Angel, which happens about an hour and a half into the game, was surprisingly tough. He left me with very little health afterwards, which got me killed, so I had to do that whole fight with him all over again. You can recover your health by killing enemies, but I found that the enemies drop magic recovery power when I needed health more. Thankfully, there are potions scattered throughout the level that you can pick up, one's for health, one's for your Slayer power, and they usually recover a generous portion of each. But there is a limit to how many you can pick up at a time, and this affects items like Holy Water Vials and Hellfire, so be on the lookout for that. Overall, I really enjoyed my time with Buffy the Vampire Slayer for the Xbox. Though the game recommends you already be a fan of the show to understand some of the goings-ons and the backstories of certain characters, as someone who's barely seen any of it, I was still able to follow the storyline well enough, and the gameplay itself is easily worth the price of admission. And it's got that great spooky atmosphere. The game did get a sequel a year later, and unlike this game, it was released on the Xbox, PS2, and GameCube, but I never played it. I hear it wasn't as good. It was developed by Eurocom instead of the Collective, so that might have had something to do with it. I might check it out at some point, just for the sake of knowing for sure. It almost makes me want to check out the show, but I probably won't now because Joss Whedon's kind of a... yeah. Alright, 1 game down, 3 to go. And we aren't going to be moving too far away, as the next game was also developed by the Collective and also based on a popular film franchise that I don't have too much history with. I swear this isn't going to be an ongoing theme in this video. The next game on the list is Indiana Jones and the Emperor's Tomb. Now, unlike the Collective's previous game, this game was also released on the PS2 just a few months after the release of the Xbox version. When people talk about games based off of Indiana Jones, they usually bring up the LucasArts point-and-click classic, Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis, or the 2 Lego games, or the pinball game. Though this is the one that really ran with the idea of you feeling like Indiana Jones, as far as I can tell. Again, I rarely hear people bring up any of the other ones. According to the game's Wikipedia page, Emperor's Tomb is set between the first and second films. Released in 2003, during a time when there was no Indiana Jones in the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, Emperor's Tomb tasks Dr. Jones with finding an artifact called the Heart of the Dragon, said to have been sealed in the tomb of China's first emperor before it's stolen from the evil forces that are after it, for it's said to have the ability to control the will of men. Who might these evil forces be? Well, the game takes place in 1935, so... Nazis. And in order to effectively navigate the inside of the Emperor's Tomb, he'll need to reassemble the Mirror of Dreams, which is fragmented into 3 pieces, one of which you unwittingly find in the game's opening act. And the game kicks off with you attempting to find the other 2 pieces of the mirror. The game's plot is basic enough and doesn't require that you watch 3 seasons of a TV show first to get the full picture. If you've played Buffy the Vampire Slayer, something you'll notice almost immediately is that the game feels quite a bit like it, almost completely identical to Buffy. And that's because it is. It's running off the exact same game engine as Buffy, though with a few refinements to the controls. The biggest difference with this game is that when you fight enemies, you don't have to stake them to finish them off. It plays more like a conventional action game where you just have to wail on enemies until they fall down. Unless they get back up, then that's it. There is no extra step to finishing them off. Indy doesn't feel quite as agile as Buffy, but I also didn't find him as floaty either. If you had a problem with the way Buffy the Vampire Slayer handles its healing items, you might be pleased to see that Indy handles it a bit differently. He carries a canteen with him at all times, and drinking from it recovers your health. The canteen can be refilled at fountains that are damn near everywhere, and if your canteen's already full when you refill it, your health will be refilled instead. You also get access to a few guns, such as Indy's revolver, shotguns, SMGs, and the like, but the real meat of the combat comes from the hand-to-hand, which, again, controls almost exactly the same as it did in Buffy. But honestly, when the combat is this satisfying, I don't really mind it.
Come on, what's your style?
Though this game has a slightly heavier emphasis on platforming and leap-of-faith jumping than Buffy did. Indy, of course, comes packing his trademark whip, which is used mostly for swinging off of special ledges for those platforming segments. Like I said before, there are guns in the game, but they aren't exactly the main focus, barring one particular boss fight. They can help you take out enemies easier. You can even one-hit kill an enemy if you go for a headshot, but they're really just there to help you even up the odds when the enemies themselves have guns. The whip isn't useful in combat aside from disarming enemies, but it is an effective strategy if you're feeling ballsy enough. The game does have a bit of a cover system in place for its shooting and stealth sections, but it isn't quite as refined as the ones in, say, Uncharted. You just pull the left or right triggers while hugging the wall and you'll automatically lock onto the enemy that's closest to you. Again, it's not as refined as the ones in Uncharted and the like, but it is effective and it gets the job done well enough. Overall, if you enjoyed the way Buffy the Vampire Slayer plays, I'd say you would have a pretty good time with this game too. The combat is still as fun and satisfying as it was in Buffy, and it looks really good by 2003 standards. The camera's got a bit of a mind of its own at times, and the frame rate can dip below 20 frames per second during some intense moments, and it is a bit buggy here and there. And I also really wouldn't recommend playing it on an Xbox 360 either.
Hey! What the heck is that?
It is 1/3 of the Mirror of Dreams. The mirror is the key to finding the crypt's entrance within the tomb.
You do not realize the magnitude of the events you've set in motion, Dr. Jones.
But it is a solid game, and it doesn't ask you to know a whole lot about the source material for you to enjoy it. In 2015, the PC version got re-released on GOG.com, which apparently fixes up some of the bugs and glitches, though it's up to you whether or not you feel more comfortable playing it with a mouse and keyboard as opposed to a standard controller. Now let's shift gears and talk about a game based off of something I actually am familiar with. Now this one is a bit of an interesting case. The Nightmare Before Christmas, Oogie's Revenge, released for the PS2 in Japan in 2004 and 2005 in Europe and North America for the PS2 and Xbox, serves as a loose sequel to the 1993 film. There was also a game on the Game Boy Advance released around the same time that served as a prequel, but I can't talk about that one because I never played it. I did pick this game up the year it came out though. The same day I bought Castlevania Dawn of Sorrow, as a matter of fact. The game opens with Jack Skellington having outdone himself for Halloween and feeling a deep need to top it, during which he receives a new invention from the Doctor called the Soul Robber.
Amazing!
With it in hand, he sets out to find new ideas for next Halloween. In his absence, the three resident brats, Lock, Shock, and Barrel, decide to resurrect their old boss, Oogie Boogie, who then tricks the entire town into creating dangerous traps and monsters under the guise of it being what Jack would have wanted. To put it bluntly, Oogie's Revenge is a Devil May Cry clone, which is honestly pretty interesting considering that both games were developed by Capcom. And when I say it's a Devil May Cry clone, I mean many of the mechanics are damn near identical to Devil May Cry. Wait a minute, didn't I just finish talking about how the other two games are identical to each other? Yeah, anyway. Nightmare Before Christmas is a combat-heavy beat-em-up with fixed camera angles similar to the first three Devil May Cry games, and the fact that they made a game based off of Nightmare Before Christmas of all things with these similar mechanics is surreal. You could call it baby's first Devil May Cry and you wouldn't be too far off the mark. Aesthetically speaking, Oogie's Revenge nails the look of the film perfectly. Everything from how the locations look to the blacklight look of the stronger enemies looks amazing. It's a really good looking game for 2004. The strong presentation also carries over into the voice acting. Jack and Oogie are both voiced by the original actors from the film, and they both do a great job reprising their roles.
What are we gambling for, you ask? Nothing all that valuable. Just your life!
It probably helps that they both had some practice a few years earlier voicing them in Kingdom Hearts. While not every actor from the film returns, the stand-ins still give great performances. I wish I could say the same for the game's music, though. There are original atmospheric tracks made for the background music, but the songs used in standard battles and boss fights use songs from the film with new lyrics. The film had great music, don't get me wrong, but the regular battle music for the first half of the game is just This Is Halloween on a loop. And they use it for every fight against regular enemies. I was starting to get Sonic Unleashed flashbacks playing this. It probably wouldn't have been so bad if they didn't also use the song for both the title screen and the end credits. I would give you an example of how annoying this is, but the song is copyrighted by Disney, and yeah, I don't want to get copyright strikes, so just look it up for yourself. Yeah, you'll see how annoying it is. The combat system is considerably easier than Devil May Cry, as it doesn't require as much input from the player. In fact, for the first 3 or 4 chapters of the game, you can only do this puny little 2-hit combo until you have enough yellow souls to upgrade the Soul Robber to a 3-hit combo. Though you can also grab objects and enemies and throw them into each other though, so there's that. Items are also the basic attack-enhancing blue souls, which also occasionally drop from enemies, crystal vials to carry around fountain water to heal you, and grabbing 4 cleverly hidden crystal skulls will also create a new glass vial so you can carry more fountain water with you. Hey, wait a minute. Crystal skulls? On the downside, the fixed camera angles can work against you in some fights, and I occasionally had some problems with the auto-aim facing away from the enemies I wanted to hit. Admittedly, for a kids game, this might be a little too tough for kids. Not because of the combat system, but more so the exploration. Kids might not be used to the fixed camera angle exploration similar to that of Devil May Cry, so they may have some trouble navigating the areas. Older, more experienced gamers more likely won't have as much trouble, but even then, I still found trying to figure out where I was supposed to go kinda challenging. One particular area you may get lost in is the hinterlands with its winding trails. Strangely enough though, I did find the map to be very useful here, so I guess this area was just a case of paying attention to your surroundings, especially since the game makes you explore this area twice. All things considered, I do have to ponder who this game was aimed at. Its navigation might make it too hard for kids, but it's perfectly fair for older gamers. Maybe it's aimed at fans who grew up with the movie and are also experienced with this type of DMC-style character action game. It might be enjoyable enough if you've never seen the movie since the plot is self-contained enough, but I would recommend watching the movie first. Either way, if you happen to like both the film and the games that this heavily borrows from, then this is another game I'd recommend picking up if you ever see it in the wild for cheap. So now we're at the last game on my list, and it's a game exclusive to a Nintendo console of all things. Admittedly, this probably isn't the strongest game on my list. Heck, I doubt the game itself is even a fan favorite amongst the community it was released to, but it's one I have a really deep attachment to. Now, we tackled games based off of live-action properties, and a game based off of a stop-motion animated film. So now let's talk about a game based off of an anime. Now, I know what you're thinking, and the answer is no, it's not a DBZ game. It's One Piece Unlimited Adventure for the Nintendo Wii. For those of you who've never heard of this series, One Piece is a series that began as a manga all the way back in 1997 in Japan, and has been ongoing nearly every single week for the last 21 years, still going strong to this day. It stars Luffy and his crewmates of the Straw Hat Pirates as they sail across the world searching for the mythical treasure known as the One Piece. Along the way, fighting powerful enemies such as rival pirates, the government, and other sinister foes. And this is an extremely heavily abridged summary of the overall plot. For a series that's been going nearly non-stop since 1997, with over 900 manga chapters and over 800 anime episodes under its belt, it is a daunting task summing up everything that's happened in the series. I would try, but this video has been going on long enough, so let's just go ahead and talk about the game now. One Piece Unlimited Adventure takes place after the events in Eni's Lobby and before the events in Thriller Bark. Or, if you don't follow the series, between episodes 312 and 313, after Frankie joins but before Brook joins. Luffy and company are hitting low reserves of food on their ship when they suddenly happen across a mysterious jewel, which causes a massive island to emerge out from under their ship, causing a crash landing, separating the crew from their ship and each other. Luffy quickly reunites with his crew while still carrying the mysterious jewel, which not only causes their memories of their past to emerge, but also terraform the island around them. Meanwhile, a mysterious creature is hunting them, who also appears to be after the jewel. Thinking that the island is hiding a massive treasure, the crew decide to explore the island, which they believe will also lead them to their ship. I would hope so, because at the time of this series, it is a brand new ship. The game was released in Japan in 2007 and in North America in early 2008. This game was a major standout from all the other One Piece games that were released in the United States, not only because it wasn't purely a fighting game or a party-style minigame collection, but also because it was the only One Piece game to feature the new voice actor cast from Funimation.
Well, what do you think? I tried to come up with something that would fit each of you. Does it make me look cool?
That's all right.
Oh, not bad.
Wow, this is great.
Nice.
Amazing!
Well, Miss Navigator, I'd say you have pretty good taste.
I should mention that before, One Piece was licensed in the United States by 4Kids Entertainment, who, may I add, are responsible for this little gem.
Now pummel his head flatter than the shape of the earth!
At the time this game came out, the Funimation dub had been on TV for just a few months, picking up the series from the point where 4Kids had left off, and they were also gearing up to release it on DVD starting from episode 1, redubbing all the old episodes 4Kids initially dubbed in an uncut format. So the fact that this game featured characters not only past and present, but also future, all voiced in English by new actors, yeah, I was all over that. Heck, this was our first time hearing Frankie in English.
Frankie the Shipwright!
I could honestly dedicate an entire video to just this one game. That's how much emotional attachment I have for it. So we covered the basic plot and the production behind the localized version, so let's talk about the actual gameplay. It's an action-adventure game with light RPG elements such as stat building and attack leveling. You control all 8 Straw Hat Pirates, switching between them with the touch of a button. They all have their own unique attacks and abilities, which can be leveled up and made stronger. Leveling up certain attacks to certain levels will also unlock new ones, and crafting certain weapons, such as Nami's Climb Attack, will also unlock new attacks. They're all signature attacks from the series, which can be utilized in different ways, either by using a 3-hit button combo, pressing the attack button while in midair, attacking while dashing, or by shaking the Wii remote. Yeah, it was a Wii game. We can't have a game released on the Wii and not have motion controls in there somewhere. It's like against the law or something. Though at the start of the game, only the basic A button 1-hit attack is all you start out with all 8 characters. So early on, you'll be stuck using pathetic 1-hit attacks for a little bit until you unlock the ability to use multiple hits for every character. There are 7 major areas in the game and also a hub area. The main task is to get to the end of an area, which is usually capped off by a boss fight. With the exception of the game's final boss, all of the bosses in the game are characters that have appeared in the series' run up to 2007, usually the villains. Along the way, you'll see the orb reacting in certain spots, which means the opening of new paths. To open these paths, you'll need to feed the orb for it to be powered up to a certain level, but you'll also sometimes need to have certain items in your inventory, either by crafting the items or finding them in the level. Like I mentioned before, there's a bit of a crafting system in this game. You unlock new craftable items by collecting smaller items in the levels and then taking them back to your camp. For example, after building the appropriate areas such as Sanji's stove or Chopper's medicine compounding area, you'll be able to craft healing items and food to increase your HP and special meters. You can also craft new medicines and foods by collecting the right items or by fishing and catching bugs.
I've come up with a new recipe.
Usopp can also create new items with the right parts, such as larger carrying capacity bags, the fishing pole, the bug net, and so much more. Those tools can eventually be upgraded as well. It became easy for me to just go into levels for the express purpose of gathering items to craft more things with. The game even has a 2-player versus mode similar to the earlier Grand Battle games, where you can play as any of the Straw Hats or any of the villains you fight during the main game, and they all have their own unique skill sets as well. And about that whole powering up the orb by feeding it items thing, well, this might be the game's biggest fault, but that whole thing of having the right items on you and feeding the orb to a certain point, this is most of the game. You do this in every level. While that might not be too much of an issue, it can be annoying when you don't have enough of a mandatory item, which has to be crafted back at the camp, and if you don't have the proper items to craft that item, you have to go back into levels and farm those items until you do. There are no stores, so you can't buy anything. You can't even buy healing items for that matter. The ingredients are easy enough to find, but I still find that it's an issue sometimes. And another reason why I can really only recommend this game to hardcore One Piece fans is that they expect you to know so much of the series' first 10 years in order for any of the backstory or flashback cutscenes to have any effect. Try showing this cutscene to someone who's never seen One Piece and have them explain it to you.
This is all your fault. Just when the government was ready to play nice, you had to refuse to hand it over.
Heck, I'll admit, when I first saw it, I didn't even know exactly what he meant. I guess I shouldn't be so harsh considering it's a game based off of a long-running anime, so of course it's only for fans. But Indiana Jones had a super basic self-contained plot that was simple enough for someone like me who's never seen any of the films to follow. Come to think of it, this and Nightmare Before Christmas also pretty much require prior knowledge of the source material to get the clearest picture. But this game has it the worst, as it requires knowledge of 10 years worth of material. One Piece Unlimited Adventure had the privilege of being the last One Piece game to be released in the United States until 2012, when One Piece Pirate Warriors was released for the PS3. Unfortunately, the Funimation voice actors never returned for any One Piece game released in North America after Unlimited Adventure. There were 2 more One Piece games released on the Nintendo Wii in 2008, but because of what I can only assume poor sales of this game, us Yanks didn't get either of those 2 games. I'm still pretty bummed about this. This game also ended up becoming pretty rare online, so this might be the rarest Wii game that I own. Get it if you're a collector or a diehard One Piece fan, but that's really the only way I can recommend it. And now it's that time of the video where I go off script. This was my list of surprisingly decent licensed games. Truth is, I actually had way more games for this list, but I decided because the video would have been too long, I decided to keep it as just 4 games for now. I'm gonna do a part 2 at some point in the future, but before we do that, I'm gonna focus on a few more shorter videos just for the sake of variety and getting content out faster. So I hope you're looking forward to that. If you want to hear more from me, I have a Twitter down there, there's a link down there, and I also got a Twitch, and I got a Smashcast, and I got a Let's Play channel. Links for all of those are going to be below, and yeah, you're probably not even watching this anymore, so I'm just going to go ahead and end the video here. Thank you for watching, I hope you have a nice day, and take care.